Welcome to Thresholds. I'm Dr. Layla Arman. Today, we're diving into a specific strand of spiritual cosmology as reflected in a mid-20th century work, The Divine Order and the Universe, by Dr. Bedri Ruselman. This text, compiled in 1959 and kept sealed in notary safes for 54 years before being released, brings together mediumistic communiques attributed to a group called the Plan of Sublime Duty, given the codename Undead or Pioneer.
Fascinating. Hi, I'm Michael Reyes. I've studied many channeled systems and comparative mystical currents, and Russellman's book sits at an intriguing crossroads. It's medical doctor compiled, mediumistically received, and it explicitly engages topics like cosmology, time, and earth changes. That combination, science-adjacent credibility plus a channeled source, raises interesting questions right from the start.
Exactly. And I want to be clear from the outset, we're treating this material as a serious instance of 20th century spiritual literature. We'll unpack its historical claims, the 1959 origin, the role of Attila Geyer as medium, the Plan of Sublime Duty, and then look at its major themes: spirit and matter, a new picture of time, the nature of love and the journey toward essence, and the book's warnings about natural events and what it calls a huge planet approaching our system. There's a lot to hold.
So let's slow down and start with the people. Layla, how does the story present Dr. Bedri Ruselman? What makes his biography relevant to the credibility and tone of the book?
Well, Michael, Ruselman is a medical doctor who also became deeply involved in spiritualist circles. That dual identity matters because it shapes how the material is compiled. A clinician's mindset often brings systematic organization, an interest in causality, and sometimes a cautious, evidential frame. The book's presentation, sealed documents, dated communiques, leans into that partly scientific aura, while still being embedded in a mediumistic tradition, where the messages are received through the psychic faculties of someone else.
That's a familiar pattern in channeled literature. A medium transmits, a compiler organizes. We see similar dynamics in other traditions, automatic writing plus editorial curation.
That raises familiar questions. How much of the text is faithful to the originating intelligence, and how much is filtered through the personalities and cultural assumptions of the medium and the compiler? Those are classic epistemology questions for any channeled corpus.
And those questions are healthy. We'll circle back to criteria for evaluating channeled material: coherence, moral value, resonance with established spiritual wisdom, empirical resonance, etc. But before that, Layla, can you give listeners a concise sense of the book's claims? You mentioned time, love, and a huge planet.
Sure. From the publisher blurbs and listings, the book promises an unending reign of knowledge starting from spirit and matter, a new description of time and the universe's structure, a path from love toward essence, and practical counsel on existential freedom and planetary awakening. It also addresses current-sounding concerns: global warming, floods, earthquakes, and something more dramatic: the inevitable effects of a huge planet approaching our solar system from another system. The narrative is both metaphysical and prognostic.
That combination, metaphysical reframing plus prophetic warnings, is what makes it so compelling and also potentially contentious. People who study channeled cosmologies often find the blend of spiritual psychology and planetary prophecy can either inspire ethical action or provoke fear, depending on how it's framed. Layla, how do you hear the book positioning natural events like floods and earthquakes?
In the available descriptions, these events are treated as both physical phenomena and meaningful signals. The book reportedly frames global warming, floods, and earthquakes as lessons we must learn, part of a divine order where natural events carry ethical and educational significance.
That moralized ecology echoes a lot of spiritual traditions that interpret ecological crisis as correlated with collective consciousness. It's an ethical reframing. Heat becomes a metaphor for collective fever, floods as emotional overflow. But we should be careful. This doesn't replace the scientific account of greenhouse gases and policy choices. It layers a metaphysical meaning on top of measurable causes.
The book's posture, according to the listings, is to add spiritual preparation to practical awareness. It talks about spiritual preparation through predicted facts about inevitable natural events. So the orientation is know the science, but also cultivate inner resources and communal resilience.
Layla, let me interrupt for a second, because listeners always ask, this huge planet language, what are we actually dealing with? Is the book explicit that it's an astronomical body, or could it be symbolic? What do the sources say?
Good question, Michael. The blurbs explicitly mention the inevitable effects of a huge planet which is approaching from another system to our solar system. That sounds literal as presented in the catalog, but interpretively, the source material invites several readings. Literal, an incoming rogue planet with gravitational effects. Symbolic, an archetypal incoming influence that represents massive change. Or subtle, an astral or energetic body affecting Earth's vibrational state. We can't authoritatively state which the original communicators meant without the full text, but the catalogs present the phrase in an ostensibly literal register.
That ambiguity is common in channeled texts. Historically, other systems, Theosophy, Ruloff, even certain spiritist accounts, use planetary imagery both literally and metaphorically. For comparative context, the sources we're using point to Joseph Ruloff as an example of a multiplanetary spiritual cosmology. That helps listeners understand this isn't an isolated motif.
Exactly. And that brings us neatly to the book's cosmological core, spirit and matter, and a new description of time. The catalogs emphasize an unending reign of knowledge, starting with spirit and matter, and a new description of time and the structure of the universe. Michael, how might we situate those claims alongside modern physics and metaphysical traditions?
We can do it carefully. On the physics side, time gets complicated in relativity, a block universe picture, non-absolute simultaneity, and so on. In metaphysical traditions, time is often treated as an educational device, linear on lower planes, malleable on higher planes, or altogether illusory in the absolute. The book, based on its blurb, seems to synthesize these strands. It likely posits non-linear or layered time, where earthly sequence is a curriculum for spirit, while higher realms experience a different temporality. That resonates with both the spiritual claim of an eternal now and some modern relativistic intuition.
Right. I mean, it's fascinating because if you come from an astrophysics background, which I partly do, you're used to speaking about time as a parameter in equations. But spiritual cosmologies frequently reconceptualize time as a pedagogical tool. The idea that souls use sequence and limitation to learn, that's a theme across many channels. The phrase structure of the universe in the blurbs suggests multiple planes, physical, astral, mental, spiritual, rather than a single material continuum.
And that multi-layered cosmos often comes with a hierarchy of being. In Russelman's framing, as the catalogs imply, there's a plan of sublime duty guiding evolution. That introduces an intentional order, what the title calls divine order, where laws govern progression, suffering, and freedom. Layla, how do you reconcile divine order with human free will? Many listeners struggle with that.
It's a classic tension. The text's implied answer, consistent with many esoteric traditions, is that divine order provides a lawful framework, but doesn't negate free will. We have freedom of choice inside a structure of cause and effect. The book reportedly emphasizes both responsibility and hope. Responsibility through understanding consequence, hope through the possibility of aligning with love and essence. So freedom is real, but its exercise operates within order, which produces predictable results, or lessons when misused.
That's a good practical take.
And the book's ethical core, its theory of love, is central here. According to the descriptions, it offers the true comprehension of love, the advance from love towards the essence. That language suggests love is not merely sentimental, it's structural, perhaps the organizing principle of the universe. That's common in channeled metaphysics. Love equals the binding energy.
Yes, love as cosmic law. The material speaks of love as a ladder, from narrow personal attachment to universal, selfless love directed toward the essence. Practically, the implication is that human relations are training grounds for higher forms of love, which, again, connects to the way the text links inner evolution with planetary awakening. One informs the other.
Layla, quick interruption. Listeners will want concrete examples. If we take flood or heat as symbolic feedback, how does cultivating a higher love change our interaction with climate policy or disaster response? In other words, what does spiritual preparation look like?
Great question. Spiritual preparation, based on the text's emphasis, doesn't mean hiding in caves. It means cultivating inner stability, compassion, community readiness, and ethical action, reducing consumption, supporting resilient infrastructure, fostering cooperation. The book frames disasters as lessons. Responding from love means practical solidarity, not fatalistic resignation. So, spiritual preparation is both inner work and outward engagement.
Yes, this is an important corrective to apocalyptic misreadings which lead to passivity. Now, the topic that will provoke the most scrutiny: prophecy.
Many prophetic statements in channeled literature are conditional or symbolic. They can be used to motivate ethical action or to foment fear. As scholars, we recommend a cautious, discerning stance. Evaluate moral content, coherence, and practical consequences of adopting the prophecy as literal truth.
Which brings us to epistemology. How do listeners evaluate the authority of a channeled work? The source material actually gives us a useful checklist: internal coherence, moral quality, alignment with perennial wisdom, and empirical resonance. Michael, would you elaborate on each briefly?
Of course. Internal coherence. Does the text contradict itself? Is its cosmology consistent? Moral quality. Does it produce more compassion and responsibility or more fear and exclusivity? Alignment with perennial wisdom. Does it resonate with the universal teachings across cultures? Love, service, humility. Empirical resonance. When one lives by its guidance, is there a measurable improvement in personal or communal well-being? Those are practical filters for any channeled claim. Treat claims as hypotheses to be tested in one's life, rather than dogma.
If these messages are spiritually true, why were they sealed for 54 years? It's a mythic motif. Writings are hidden until the right time. The source material suggests two possibilities: spiritual timing, texts are released when humanity is ready, or practical legal reasons, protection from distortion, preservation of authenticity.
Historically, many esoteric communities have invoked similar tropes, texts hidden until a future age. It helps create a sense of revelatory timing.
What about comparatives? Where does Ruselman's work fit alongside theosophy, Kardecist spiritualism, or New Age channeled materials?
It sits in that family, I'd say. Comparatively, theosophy articulates 7 planes. Kardec systematized spiritist messages. Ruloff developed a detailed multi-stage cosmic evolution. Ruselman's book appears to share that genre's formal features, but with distinctive emphases: the strong focus on earthly environmental crises and the dramatic language about a huge approaching planet.
And that environmental emphasis is notable, because if the compilation date is indeed 1959, it predates mainstream public discussion about global warming. The fact that the catalogs associate the book with global warming and environmental events makes it historically interesting.
Indeed, it's one reason the book attracts attention. It appears to connect mid-century mediumistic wisdom with late 20th and early 21st century ecological awareness.
We encourage listeners to read primary texts and evaluate for themselves.
The responsible approach is to integrate useful insights while avoiding exclusive or fatalistic readings.
For people who resonate with the text, what practical steps does the book suggest based on the descriptions? I hear inner work love, alignment with essence, plus communal readiness. Anything else from the sources?
The catalogs emphasize existential freedom and planetary awakening. That suggests practices: cultivating freedom from existential fear, developing moral agency, and participating in collective awakening through service, ecological stewardship, and building resilient communities. In short, inner transformation plus outward responsibility.
Okay, short aside. Wow, that's a lot. But I want to pause here and ask you directly, Michael. What would be your single-sentence advice to someone encountering Russelman's text for the first time?
Read it with an open mind and a critical heart. Value its ethical teachings and test its guidance in the laboratory of your life.
Perfect. I'll add, take seriously what increases your compassion and sense of responsibility. Be skeptical of anything that reduces you to fear.
Quick note, some listeners will ask about the huge planet again. Our closing suggestion on that: treat it as a motif that can be literal, symbolic, or energetic. Regardless of literal truth, the ethical imperative remains: prepare through service, resilience, and love. That's the action we can all agree on.
And we should underline one final point from the sources. The book frames revelation as ongoing, an unending rain of knowledge, which invites humility. No single text contains final answers. Many channels point to cumulative, continuous guidance.
Good note. And for listeners who want to explore further, the English translation appears in bibliographic records around 2014. Publishers list the book online: Barnes & Noble, Storytel, Kitab Urdu, and so on.
I'll close by saying, whether or not you take every claim literally, the divine order and the universe invites us to enlarge our moral imagination, seeing natural events as teachers, loving more expansively, and preparing our communities with courage and compassion. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Layla, and thank you, listeners. If this episode sparked questions, write to us. Tell us which thread you want us to pull next: the new description of time, the ethics of prophecy, or a deep dive into the plan of sublime duty. Until next time.